I think it was Naomi Klein who said there's no, like, and I'm misquoting here, there's no distinguishable difference between Australian government and the Australian fossil fuel industry.
Yeah, no.
And I think that is a very, very good way to put it. Like, there isn't a clear difference between them. There is no point where one ends and the other begins.
So the revolving door is so...
Well,
it's not even a door. They knocked it out and made it an open plan office.
It's a WeWork situation for the Mineral Council. No, Vice did a really weirdly good article on that where they just... It's weird that Vice did this given Australia's defamation laws, but there's a Vice article at the moment which is essentially their headline, like, remember their faces. And it has the faces of 3 different execs from, they used to be in the Liberal Party in state and federal, that are now, like, lobbyists for the mineral. And it's like, these are the people.
Yeah, there's got to be a joke in there somewhere about, like, they own all the, like, the fossil fuel industry owns all the government offices, and then they pay it as renters and I don't know,
a franking, like a
when they like
negative,
always
stay
because what they're like, oh, my wife owns this apartment in Canberra that I stay in, and I charge
Double
the rent,
dipping.
like I pay the rent and I claim that back as a per diem.
I mean, that's just called corruption, I think.
Well, is it really corruption if everyone's doing it, Lang?
It's reverse pork barreling.
Is it really corruption if the Labor Party's doing it as well?
We've already lost focus. So, hi again.
My focus is laser beams.
This is another episode of Not Good Enough, an inadequate response to inadequate responses. My name is Mitch Alexander. I'm with the Toms.
I'm Tom McLean.
I'm Tom Lang.
And one thing I did want to ask you guys, actually, just to start off, is Melbourne, Sydney, Canberra, we've been choking on bushfire smoke for days, and it sort of clears out, and then we get some rain, and that's pretty cool. We get rain in the major cities, so obviously climate change has been pushed off for another year, which is good.
Oh yeah, no, I'm so glad that the rain dispelled the smoke.
Yep.
Now we don't have to worry about it.
Exactly, it's all good. So the
bushfires aren't coming back.
So like I said last week, the podcast is now being shut down because Mother Nature took care of climate change.
Yeah, well, we said we want action on coal, and God made it rain.
Yeah, Melbourne got rained on. No, so the thing I did want to ask, though, is that I think all 3 of us have been checking those the air quality websites for a while.
Oh, yeah,
and then it
love
goes
that
into
air
like
quality website.
poor, very poor, hazardous, and we've got some of our masks that we bought from Bunnings that we're not giving to our, working friends that actually need them. So,
Gotta hoard your masks, man.
but
We're at the point of hoarding masks. We're at the point of, oh no, Bunnings is out of masks.
Yeah.
I hear there's a few masks at the Total Tools.
So this is the thing that gets me, is that once it gets into poor and it recommends you put a mask on, that's when I put my mask on. But today was sitting at like average, and it was like a 52, and the smiley face of the person was like an apprehensive, like wry grin, like, oh, but like look
Wry grin.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go outside.
Well, that's
Just
the thing.
try and stop me.
So I'm like, do I just go outside without the masks on? And even though there is smoke haze, my calculus has sort of been, well, it's not over 100 parts per million, so I guess I'll just ingest this much smoke.
I think when it's in the yellow, it's fine. It's like, it's...
But what if it's in the yellow for 6 months?
Then you're just like living in a worse city. So that's the thing.
No, you're absolutely right. It's basically the air quality we're seeing now is what, like, I don't know, Delhi gets many days of the year. And the life expectancy living in a city like that is significantly worse. Yeah. You just have worse health at all times. If the air quality here is like, a standard to not great Melbourne day, what did you say, like 50 or something?
52 today.
Right. So it's what we would consider fine is still less healthy than living out in the great outdoors where you're just getting pristine air.
Yeah.
And it's like smoking a cigarette now and then. It's probably not that bad. It's still worse than smoking no cigarettes.
So once we fix climate change in the next 2 or 3 years, like my lungs can actually recuperate from these average days much better. Like it will start to heal over winter as opposed to starting to heal in 2030.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just sort of like salami's a carcinogen. But you're right. But you're not like, oh, every salami's doing you damage, right? Am I going to meme? But like, you can have a little smoke as a treat.
I just want salami sticks with stickers of like just people like suffering the debilitating effects of too much salami, and it's just one dude in a hospital bed. He's got a really hot mouth.
I really feel like there's like a vegetarian listening to the podcast being like, yeah, do you know what? You could put a picture of a pig suffering the health good adverse effects of salami.
And they'd be right.
The smoke is a weird thing because Melbourne and probably I'm not, but like the sort of Australia is coming from a position of our air quality is really world-leadingly good when we're not on fire, and so when we're like, oh my god, it hit 50.
Yeah.
That's like, I don't know. Welcome to anywhere.
Yeah, we've gone 0 to 100 basically. And I
literally. Hey.
Yeah, I really think the analogy I just keep coming back to is cigarettes. It's
Yeah.
if you smoke a shitload of cigarettes, that's really bad. If you smoke a cigarette now and then, it's not great. You know, you're not going to, if you're a healthy young person like us, you won't feel the impact of that probably. Some point down the line, maybe you'll go, oh no.
Yeah.
Turns out that wasn't great. But it's those tiny little bits. Maybe you smoke one cigarette and then you never smoke another cigarette. There's no amount of cigarettes that are good, but there's an amount that are like, you'll get
Acceptable.
away with it.
Yeah. I just think people need to know that the smoke levels need to be monitored, and when they actually get into very poor and hazardous, even if you're okay, don't breathe it in. It's actually very bad for you to do it.
Yeah.
And if you want any proof of that, 3 of the world leading athletes had to not do their sport in Australia.
It's so stupid that we made them do it in the first place. And it's pretty stupid that they did it.
Yeah, so
solidarity with the athletes, but if
So
someone's
again-
like, it's time for you to play tennis, and you're like, I can't see the other side of the court because the smoke is so thick, just be like...
Yeah, for
no.
context, there is some tennis matches or something happening in Australia at the moment, and they were playing across multiple days when the smoke level was literally between very poor and hazardous. That's a medical reading. That's the official number.
Yep.
Someone had to pull out because she couldn't breathe properly. She had a coughing fit.
coughing fit.
Someone had to take a medical break and get a oxygen breather, and someone else coughed up blood. But those two last legends actually finished their bloody match. So good on them, Aussie spirit.
Now, is there a union in professional tennis players? And if not, it sounds like we need one.
So what we wanted to talk today specifically about is this bullshit that's coming out now from the Morrison government. There's been a hard pivot once they sort of realised that people can see smoke in their cities. People look outside and they're like, oh, it is the apocalypse. So Scott Morrison, Prime Minister of Australia, and Karen Andrews, who it turns out is the Minister for Industry, Science and Technology, which is... Just reading that then, that's a huge, broad portfolio for one person to have.
I wonder
it's
which
where
of them is the most important in that portfolio.
It's so good. Industry, Science and Technology. So she takes care of the coal industry, genetically modified food, and like the rollout of the next PlayStation.
I think it's the coal industry and the science industry and the technology industry. And if it's not the kind of industry that's turning a profit, then it's not covered. So CSIRO being like, hey, don't go outside, there's too smoke, you got to shut down coal. Look, how much money are you making for a CSIRO? Because if you're not making a whole bunch, why do we give a shit what you got to say?
Call us back when you invent another Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Wi-Fi 2. So I'll read this at length, just because I think it is sort of good for context for what we want to talk about. But this is the pivot coming from a government that, keep in mind, still has members of its parliament flat out refusing to concede that there is a link between these bushfires and climate change. Craig Kelly got absolutely torn apart on British TV. I don't know why he was talking to people in Britain about it, but so this is a government, this is a party that still have people who are flat climate deniers, which is insane.
I would posit that the government is made up exclusively of climate deniers, and then there are some people who go on television and lie about their actual position.
Oh, look, we can't know the hearts of men. Come on now, you've got to give them the benefit.
Maybe if we ripped them out, like in Temple of Doom.
I think either they're overtly being climate deniers, like in their words, or they're just doing it through their actions, and pretty much the end result is the same.
Well, let's talk about those actions.
So there's a thing.
I want to read the quote. Go.
There's hard denial, which is climate science isn't real.
Yeah.
And then there's soft denial, which is, oh, sure, climate change is real, but let's not phase out coal.
Yeah.
That's exactly as much denial.
Well, what we've got now in terms of denial is that there's all hope is lost, and what we've really got to do is batten down the hatches. That's the hard pivot that they've gone to now. So this is the full quote. Well, not the full quote, but this is an extended verbatim quote from Miss Andrews, who told this to reporters in Canberra on Wednesday. Whenever you're listening to this, it was the last Wednesday just gone. Every second that we spend discussing whether or not climate change is real is a second that we don't spend talking about the strategies to mitigate the effects. What I am saying very clearly is that we need to move beyond a discussion on whether climate change is real and look at mitigation and adaptation strategies. We need to move beyond having a debate about climate change and accept that we need to start making some changes.
Right.
Now let's play bullshit bingo. What changes do you reckon that's going to be?
So she's talking about mitigating and adapting to the effects. That's not a mitigation. That's just adaptation. Because it's the classic, well, the effects are bad, but the causes are very good. The causes, in this case, being the fossil fuel industry.
Yep. It's such a... I genuinely, hats off to him, wasn't expecting this type of hard pivot to just bypass the discussion and just go straight into like, look, we're dead, but we've really got to make sure we've got the best quality of life before we're all done for.
Yeah, that's the thing. Wow. I mean, it's a no doomism podcast, but when people say like, let's adapt and not mitigate, I'm like, is the adaptation there like quit my job and spend more time with my loved ones? Like, that's what I'd be doing.
Yeah.
It is a hard kind of turnaround, but honestly, they haven't had a choice. They are in the position where everyone's like, oh, climate change is real. Oh, these bushfires are linked to climate change. Even if it's not being, the public message that you see, everyone fucking knows it. And so the government is forced to concede that point, but that's not a point they particularly care about. The point they care about is doing anything about it.
I'm also going to make a hot prediction today, January 19, 2020. I reckon within... let's say 4 months, right? So let's get like through winter, like so hopefully the bushfires have died down by then and the smoke is gone and a couple of the stuff, they'll be back to denial. They'll be back to, I don't know if there's a link. I reckon they'll go back.
You reckon they'll gaslight?
I reckon they will go back.
Right, so what would that be? Not by the 19th of April? Or no, 19th of May?
Yep.
By the 19th of May, we will be back to the position of there is a discussion. Because to be fair to them, they, at the very least, haven't ever said it's not real, it's not real. At least in terms of their public position and from the front bench and the leaders, they have always gone...
Oh, Barnaby Joyce has.
Look, there are people on both sides saying both types of things.
Tons of the individuals have specifically said it isn't real, but the party position has always been a little fluffy. And I don't think they're going to backpedal so far. I think they're going to keep being fluffy. They're going to say, climate change is a thing, but we need to, we can't rush into adaptation. And this is
they're gonna start denying that. They're gonna start saying that there's like a debate going on about what adaptation means.
Exactly. We can't just adapt overnight, guys. We've got to think about the economy. This is something that we've actually seen coming for a very long time. It's when you can no longer deny one part of the truth. You just take refuge in the next part of the truth.
Yeah.
First it's, we've got to adapt, but let's figure out how. Then it's, we can only adapt a bit. Then it's only the rich people can adapt in, the Sydney, Melbourne super hub. Everyone outside of there enjoy being water bandits.
Yeah.
Oh, God. So we're going to get that narrative of, like, when people start talking about adaptation, they'll be like, oh, yeah, you inner city elitists always adapting to climate change. Think about the battlers out in the bush.
Yeah, the rural folk who can't adapt.
Yeah,
Meanwhile,
they'll be demonizing adapting.
Meanwhile, the people who are actually adapting are building friggin' bunkers in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And with the money that is being siphoned out of Australian taxpayers.
Yeah, if Kim.com wants to have us on the pod, come across. We will do his podcast, he can do ours, and we can live with him forever.
I do want to talk about the mitigation adaptation thing, if I can.
Yeah, I wanted to say, like, from top level, and if we maybe work our way down.
Yeah.
But, I mean, this might lead into what you wanted to talk about. But the thing that gets me is that in terms of adaptation and mitigation, actually, top level, I do want to say, and this is something actionable for anyone listening as well, but for us, I want to definitely hit this point as hard as we can and try to keep it in mind, is that repeating those words works in favour of the Liberal government and anyone pushing it. All they want is those words to be out there so the conversation shifts to... adaptation, mitigation, as opposed to shut down the fossil fuel industry.
What do we actually do?
Yeah, so that's my big point, is that, like, I want to talk about in terms of resilience or Australian action or whatever else. And so anytime you hear us say the words either adaptation or mitigation, you've got to picture it in the SpongeBob meme with the big and small letters interchanging, because that's how we mean it.
Yeah.
But the big point for me, and Lang, given your work, you've probably got a better, more insight in this, but it does seem like a really good way to adapt to the effects of climate change and to mitigate the effects of climate change is to just take action on climate change.
Yeah, well, okay. So firstly, you hear those words a lot. A lot of people are confused about them. I mix them up sometimes. So just for anyone who's not aware, mitigation means preventing things getting bad. Adaptation means things are bad. How do we deal with it?
Yep.
And those don't have to be a choice we make, because when you actually look at what those things are, mitigation means, preventing climate change getting bad. The way you do that is you stop extracting the coal and gas. You subsidize your renewables. You get sustainable agriculture, sustainable building, good public services, and a more efficient economy. You do all of those things the bloody greenies and lefties want, okay? You have insulation in your houses so you don't need so much air conditioning. Adaptation means the climate's got a bit bad, things are a bit hot, we're seeing the conditions we're seeing now, but worse. What do you do about that? Yeah, it's the same stuff.
Yeah.
Because you can't run a lot of coal power in a climate change world because A, no one's buying coal anymore. Even if Australia's using the rest of the world, the coal industry is crashing. All of the big investment firms are divesting. What's the name? BlackRock? Just said, we're not doing coal. Okay, have fun with that economy entirely based on coal.
Your company's named after coal.
Okay, so also, when it gets too hot, your coal power plants are quite vulnerable to that, especially if there's a fire. Coal power plants, notoriously flammable.
So here's just to put a point in that, I do want to make sure that if we end up getting those rolling blackouts and brownouts that have been hinted at, that is because the coal-fired power plants that we use at the moment are too old and need upgrading.
Yeah.
So that is part of the problem as well.
And it's your transmission systems.
Exactly.
The coal power plants do go down a lot. Now, the way you fix that is with dispersed, resilient power infrastructure, and that's friggin' renewables. If everyone's got a bloody solar panel on their roof and there's wind turbines scattered all around the country, that's decentralized. So when
you're saying, so specifically when you're saying dispersed, what you're talking about is the issue that we have at the moment is that a lot of Victoria is powered by coal power plants, which are in Gippsland, which is on fire at the moment.
Place,
But what you can do is actually have smaller hubs of electricity where suburb by suburb they power themselves because they have their own solar panels on individual roofs, and they've got a wind farm nearby that isn't at risk. And if that one goes down, well, we've got this other one nearby, and we've got tidal energy somewhere else. And we've got...
more or less. Now, currently, our power infrastructure is not set up for that, but that's something we're going to have to do. We need a more resilient power infrastructure anyway. And so that's something called microgrids, and there's a lot of stuff you can do. Okay, so we've got more resilient power. We're also going to need farms that use less water and grow more sustainable crops that are more suited to the landscape. That's adaptation. It's also mitigation. You're going to have heat waves, so you're going to need houses with more insulation. You're going to need a government-subsidized insulation scheme.
But we know how that turns out. People die.
Mad thing with this, just Australian government for all of history is, okay, so for the international listener, some decades ago, it was ages ago, Julia Gillard, was it?
It was like a decade.
Yeah.
That wasn't more than 8 years ago.
Yeah, it was less than a decade.
Pink Bats.
Yeah, 1983. Nah, man, it was like 2006.
God, time moves so quickly. So
no, wait, Kevin, 07s. Fuck,
yeah,
2012.
Yeah. Okay, so anyway,
who cares? Time doesn't matter.
Somewhere in the realm of 10 years ago, we had this situation where the government was like, man, the insulation in Australian houses is garbage.
It's garbage.
It's garbage everywhere. And so let's have a government, what's the word? Sponsored
initiative,
subsidized
rebate
thing to get people to upgrade their insulation
at minimal cost.
Yeah, and due to some corners being cut and some just genuine mistakes being made.
I'm going to argue that actually, but go on. Okay, I'll argue it right now.
A couple of workmen died. And that was the end of the program.
There were a couple of fires, some things like that.
Yeah, so there were some problems that resulted in some deaths, and the program was stopped. And
there was massive campaign against it by the opposition.
Yeah, and the campaign was eventually stopped, and the minister involved had a whole bunch of disgrace, and now Australia lives in this thing of a government subsidised insulation scheme. Are you a murderer? Do you want people to die? And it's don't build it in such a way that people died. You can learn from a mistake. It doesn't mean that it's inherently fatal to provide somebody funding to put better insulation in their house.
I don't know.
All right, hang on. Now, all those points aside, and you make good points, and yeah, there probably were some corners cut and things because you try to do a ton of insulation all at once and you pull in everyone who can do insulation. Maybe there were a few corners cut, but installing new household insulation is an inherently hazardous activity because you're dealing with electrical wires, you're dealing with home roofing systems, you're installing a whole bunch of stuff that is going to be messing with your house's thermal layers and its fire safety. There is an inherent risk of fire. And if you install a whole bunch of insulation, you can statistically expect a small amount of fires. And actually, because they installed so much insulation all at once, they got a statistically expected amount of fires. They got less than the statistically expected
Yeah, they
amount
actually
of fires.
did good.
Actually.
That amount of deaths and that many fires was actually pretty good.
If you have 10 cars in the world, you might get a car accident now and then. If you have 1 million cars in the world, you're going to get more car accidents. It's not because of the way you rolled out those cars. It's just a problem of scale.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Good.
People fall off roofs installing solar panels.
Hold on a second.
Wait,
so you're
they-
saying
what?
that a government-sponsored insulation upgrade scheme just is inherently fatal?
I mean, doing anything is inherently fatal.
Yeah, I think the problem is we're mortal, and that's a big
If you
big
build
issue.
a ton of buildings, people die building buildings. Even in Australia, it's a dangerous activity. We've got pretty good building safeties, pretty good unions. People still die just because you're doing that.
There was as a tangent, there was a building site near me that something clearly bad had happened, and I just saw people and the look on the workmen's faces and the way it was all being handled and the amount of fire engines and police cars that were there. I mean, it does speak to the fact that it is kind of miraculous if you think about how tall these buildings are and how many people are working on them day in, day out, that a death can now be considered a tragedy considering how good it usually is. Because we shouldn't be up there. We're too squishy. we are way too squishy and non-aerodynamic to be up there. We fall really quick.
Yeah, and there's no amount of deaths that are fine for an insulation scheme, but it's the fact that no one really cared about the statistics. They just went, yes, a person died in Australia under Labor's watch.
Yeah.
Bloody get them.
So one thing I wanted to circle back around, and I suppose
Yep.
put to note here before we get into some more specifics, is that you're talking about an insulation scheme, which is something that should be rolled out from the government. You're also talking about more sustainable farms that use water in a better way. And for anyone who hasn't really been made aware, that scandal is still ongoing. We're still finding out. Different members of the Liberal Party have different financial and family interests in all these different schemes that are coming out, where they are essentially selling off water, or they are selling water credits to farmers, and they are sucking basins dry,
Redirecting massive river systems into huge cotton farms.
to the point now where places that need to fight these fires that are going on have no water to do so, and then townships a few over don't have any water for drinking, so they're having to ship that in.
Here's my favorite.
So the thing is, and what was the one above that? Oh, the decentralized energy and whatnot. It's something to always keep in mind is that these aren't individual things that you can do and we'll probably do a primer on this, by just going vegan. It's not that little of a thing. This is systemic each and every time. This is still a government issue that needs to be, it needs to have a systemic change built on it.
Yeah,
Sorry.
go on.
Well, my point in general is the government says they want to do adaptation. What do they think adaptation is?
Yeah.
Because the things they don't like are subsidies to help houses be more efficient. They don't like renewable energy. They don't particularly like sustainable agriculture. They don't seem to want electric cars, better public transport systems. A really important thing for adaptation, possibly one of the most important things, is a better welfare, social security, and fire, health, everything systems to support people who are going to be having more health impacts, more homelessness, more economic stress. We're going to be under a lot of economic stress. You can't economy your way out of a crashing economy.
The idea that adaptation doesn't involve pouring more money into the healthcare sector.
I genuinely think the Liberal Party's position on what adaptation means is suck it up.
Yeah.
It's just genuine. Yeah, adaptation means get used to it. That's what it means. Get used to it.
We need more money for the sports so we can be inspired by some heroes to let us know just how deep we can dig.
And by sports, I mean my rowing group from when I was in uni.
Yeah.
I think they think adaptation means underwriting coal power plants so they don't suffer a loss when the coal industry crashes. Some kind of walled ecology for the rich like they're doing in Qatar. Maybe put a few million towards firefighters and just pave all that fire hazardous Australian bush with concrete. Nice fire resistant concrete.
Would that be adaptation or mitigation?
That's adaptation.
Adaptation, yeah.
That would make everything much, much worse.
Yeah, but we wouldn't get bushfires, would we?
Yeah, no, we'd just die.
Yeah, but we wouldn't get bushfires.
No, you wouldn't. No bushfires on a dead planet.
Because like the more people that die, the less we have to spend on social services. We don't have to spend like schooling will be taken care of. Healthcare system, you can't treat a dead person. Dead people don't need social welfare, so they don't need like weekly, monthly payments. So I'm just saying. So as far as adaptation goes, it's a really Dick Smith like.
So I'm coming from like I think the Liberal Party when they say adaptation means get used to it, and you're saying I think when the Liberal Party means adaptation they mean die now.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like swing seats that we don't want to deal with anymore, and it stresses out every election. So if we could just get rid of those electorates.
Let's be honest, when they say adaptation, they just mean nothing. They just mean, let's just pretend we've got this down until a few years down the track when it's somebody else's problem. They just want to put off doing anything.
The same policy as the last, 180 years, where they're just like, we'll never do anything, but we'll just take some money for ourselves and keep it. And if people die, that happened. I can acknowledge that.
I agree with both of you, but I still think, like, to the point of this podcast, of being inadequate, adaptation and mitigation is an inadequate response. But I think it is important to try to really figure out what they are going to say counts as adaptation and mitigation. What honestly, counts as resilience? Because the thing that we need to like essentially counter, the thing we need to be mindful of, is that a not insignificant amount of the population will look at whatever they say or do and go, they are working towards it. Okay. So do you have to? Do you have ideas about what could look to be done, but it's actually not being done?
I mean, just whatever they do, honestly. Look at their actions, don't look at their words. But here's the thing we need to remember is that what we're calling adaptation, which is responding to changing conditions and emergency, is literally the entire job of the government. If you have a road that collapses, if you have a flood, if you have a fire, and the government sends sandbags or firefighters or puts some money towards that area, that's their job. That's what the money's for. They don't get kudos for that. It's literally their entire job is keeping the country running. If there's anything that happens and the government responds to it to adapt and help people live and, give some money to drought-affected farmers, that's the bare minimum. Okay, they don't get kudos for adapting to conditions because that's the entire job of the government.
Yeah, it's actually a really good point because the opposite of adapting to climate change is to ignore conditions.
Yeah.
Like we're not gonna change anything. I reckon things are honky dory.
Oh, we need to focus on adaptation. Yeah, you need to focus on doing your jobs.
But
you haven't been, and so now that you're saying, we need to focus on doing our jobs and helping Australians, I guess that's what you weren't doing before, so I guess it's a step up.
Kind of telling on themselves, and they're just sort of like, we're going to respond to changing conditions, everyone. It's like,
it's just after a big spill in the hallway, the janitor comes out and he's like, what we need to focus on now is cleaning up. Like, yeah, dude.
I just want to let everybody know that the janitorial staff will be tackling this. We will have mops, we will have buckets, we will be literally doing the thing that we're paid to do. I think the real point is you can't predict the stuff they're going to say because they don't give a shit about the stuff they're going to say. They're going to say words that sound impressive and sound like they're doing things. Ignore them. See what they're actually doing. Look at their track record. Look at where they're putting money. I'll give you a hot tip. Mm-hmm. It's about $42 billion to fossil energy every year.
So what does that mean? When you say the federal government is spending $42 billion of taxpayer dollars, bloody money.
Well, everything they spend is taxpayer money. That's when they go on holiday. It's taxpayer money.
Specifically, in this case, I've given...
And this is the most recent stats we have is 2015, because that's just the most recent stats we have. 42 billion Australian dollars in fossil energy subsidies. 2015, that's 2.3% of GDP. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's $1,700 per Australian person per year, going to supporting the fossil fuel industry.
And what does that do to support them? Because I know
it helps them not spend that much money. Now, I want to contrast with, because they say fossil exports are really important, to the Australian economy. That same year, fossil exports about 56 billion. Okay, 42 billion in subsidies, 56 billion in exports. Now, some of those subsidies were for energy and stuff, but the vast majority of our fossil fuels are for export. So
it's about 12?
Yeah.
12 billion?
That's not much money.
No.
And you'll hear a lot of stuff about how fossil fuels are really important to our economy. They're about 5% of our GDP.
So this is something I've been thinking about.
You could just cut that.
No, I've been thinking about this a lot. Like we've got the hangover that's only now starting to dissipate, where we talk about the Liberal Party and John Howard in particular. John Howard was a prime minister maybe 40 years ago. I don't know.
I remember when he got re-elected. That was the moment that I became an activist.
But so we've got this idea that John Howard was an amazing economic manager.
No.
And because essentially what he did was deliver a surplus where a government holds onto all of your money and doesn't spend it on you. They just go, look at it, like a red dragon. But all he really did was sell Telstra, and they put in what's known as the Costello tax cuts. Peter Costello was his treasurer, and that costs us billions of dollars each year. But they essentially fudged the numbers with a Telstra telco sell-off that was public. They made it private, got a whole bunch of money, and then they just, through the media as well, perpetuated this lie that they were amazing economic managers. And it's taken 20 plus years for economists the world over to be like, he was garbage. That is atrocious.
Here's another thing
But
we had
what-
is a mining boom, which was hugely mismanaged.
Well, this is what I was going to say, is that we have this idea that there was the mining boom and the mining sector keeps this country afloat. And if you look back over the recent history, we had Kevin Rudd from the centre-left party, and he was essentially kicked out because he was trying to put in a mining super tax to try and actually get some of those profits back into the public purse.
because we've got all these minerals in the ground, and the companies digging them up, and we're like, the minerals are yours.
Yeah.
You don't really have to pay for those. Like, the amount of tax that they pay is bugger all.
So we tried to increase the tax on that, and we had a leader get kicked out by his own party. We then had someone from the right-wing party try to pass better legislation on combating climate change, and he was kicked out by his party. And we also had, during the Kevin Rudd being kicked out for the mining tax situation, we had the mining council or mining conglomerates run these ads about how the mining sector props up Australia. And maybe I'm a fucking idiot for not realising this earlier, but that's just a lie.
Yeah, I got stats on this too.
It's just, give me those goddamn stats, Lane, because it is as much a lie as Howard is a good economic manager. I don't think the mining sector props up this country.
No, it doesn't. The mining sector props up billionaires in Australia.
That's the thing.
The entire thing is that the richest people in Australia all are part of the mining industry.
And then our government gets jobs with them once they have helped them out.
Absolutely. I always come into I always think, like, if I was an alien who arrived on Earth and was like, all right, how's this set up? That seems weird. Like, the fact that we've got private companies mining up Australian minerals when we could be like, no, they're ours. If you want to mine them up, you can keep 1% of what you dig up.
Yeah.
And the rest of it is Australia's because it's Australia. I've heard that argument made before, and people are like, they would just go overseas. The mining companies would go overseas. Like, yeah, but where the minerals are. They go over and get some different minerals, and then they get all the minerals there, and then they come here, and they'll be like, can we have some minerals now?
Which has been happening everywhere. Eventually, it gets harder and harder to dig up the harder to dig up minerals. So you have to go to where it's easy. So if we just played a long con and we just sort of stared them down like a Western gunslinger, and it's like, you'll be back.
But here's the thing.
You'll be back.
We wouldn't have that wouldn't happen. There are countries out there who have much, much higher taxes. Like, I think Norway, I may have to look this up, but there are countries out there which have such high taxes on their minerals that it pays for the superannuation and social services of the entire country.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's Iceland.
Now, people are still digging stuff up there because what's your option? Fracking? Do you know how crazy expensive that is?
Well, funnily enough.
Easy minerals, no matter where it is, because you're going to sell them for way, way more because you set the prices because you're a mineral industry.
Yeah. Also, though, we do have 5 new fracking locations opening up in Northern Territory now.
Don't start me.
Which is cool.
But we have lithium, iron. We've got the most lead in the world. We've got most of the, a lot of the lithium. Not the most. We've got most of the uranium.
Hell yeah.
What
pencils.
are you going to do? Get it from the Ukraine? Okay. They're going to be charging you more than us.
just being like a fucking bratty teenager about it. Where are you going to go? Okay, Ukraine.
Yeah.
Okay, you know he stinks.
A thing that I also got to interject as well is that I'm making a huge concession to the Australian government here in even acknowledging that they have any claim over the minerals that are in the ground here, because it is stolen land based off of genocide. Like, it's
Yes,
never been
exactly.
ceded. It's not Australian minerals, but it's certainly not corporate.
Yeah,
Like,
they're not the Australian government's minerals. They're certainly not Gina Reinhardt's minerals.
I think we're arguing on their turf of it's an economic thing to do, and they're still wrong even on their turf, I guess is what we're saying.
So the basic takeaway from the high level talk of like the resilience to climate change, adaptation, mitigation, is that actual adaptation and mitigation looks like what we're already asking for, which is like combating climate change.
It looks like a Green New Deal.
Yeah, and anything other than that is the same bullshit that they were peddling before they started saying adaptation and mitigation.
Yeah.
And I reckon that's going to come as a shock to maybe 3% of people who listen.
Another thing that's worth pointing out is that our left-wing party, the Labour Party, is in agreement with
That's the big thing.
with the current government on this. This is not a thing where it's like, oh, if we could only vote in the Labour Party, they would do meaningful action on climate change. They have no credibility on climate change or coal because they are still promoting opening a massive new coal mine, which is called Adani. Both parties of government are in full agreement on this.
Just today, Anthony Albanese, the leader of the fucking centre-left opposition party, said that they will not have put in place anything better than a 41% reduction in carbon emissions in this country.
Oh yeah, by 2030.
Yeah, they said they will not go higher than the Liberal Party ever, which is just the opposition party saying we're going to be at least that bad. Please vote for us next time. We're no different, so please vote for us, which is a fucking winning strategy as we've seen for the last decade. Fuck.
And that's the thing is, I heard someone say these bushfires represent Australia's Sandy Hook moment. And I really think they do.
Because they will result in nothing changing and the acceleration of the problem.
I mean, it's that kind of thing. They're so bad. Everyone in the country is in agreement of how bad they are. Everyone in the country agrees, and I use the word everyone loosely to mean the vast majority of normal Australians, agrees that we need to do shit. And you see how much normal Australians care. People have donated so much money, despite the government saying, oh no, we don't want to deprive taxpayers of their money. Taxpayers are freely giving their money away because the government won't do. Everyone cares about this. If nothing happens about this, we've passed a what's it going to take moment to, there's literally nothing that it will take.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to see bushfires this bad for another couple of years at least because we've just burnt all the bush. That's your hazard reduction right there.
Hazard reduction has to come in waves of every 3 years now.
I was watching a documentary about architecture stuff this morning that it really is our Sandy Hook moment because post Sandy Hook, America played the adaptation card.
Adaptation.
And they started building bulletproof schools.
I was about to say, are you saying that what we should do is give the RFA bulletproof vest?
I mean,
we should arm the firefighters. You've heard it here first on Not Good Enough.
Because they've found the one industry that they're not willing to touch. And in America, that's the NRA. In Australia, it's coal.
Yeah.
And they've gone, okay, keeping in mind, our one rock-solid position is we can't touch the coal industry. What do we do to prevent this? Fireproof houses, fireproof power lines, friggin', I don't know, moats around major cities. I don't know what bullshit they're going to come up with, but it's not going to fix it.
That's a really good point. I think to tie it back to the Gishgalap conversation from last week is that you can set your clock to the fact that these different industries and the politicians and media that support them just have the same arguments each time. The fact that we had Gladys What's-Her-Face in New South Wales in December before all of the cities started getting choked with smoke saying now is not the time to talk about climate. Now is not the time to politicise this tragedy. It's the exact same thing from the NRA. You will see it whenever. It's a really good point. It's a really good point to hammer home. Is that if the industry is unassailable, then you have to talk around it, and there's only so many ways you can do that. Which is, please don't politicize the issue. We have to adapt to the problem, or we need smart solutions to the problem, which are vastly stupider and more complicated than the very smart and easy solution, which is just fixing the core problem.
Oh my God. Can I quickly talk about complicated, dumb solutions?
Oh, please.
Angus Taylor, I think, said something like, we're looking into 100 different renewable technologies. I'm like, yeah, I bet you are. I bet you're not looking at them very hard because I reckon there's 4 that are actually worth looking at. If you're looking at 100 different renewable technologies, you're like, you understand renewable technologies are already a thing, Angus. You understand the rest of the world is doing all this stuff and they've already done all the looking into it you need to do. Friggin' solar, wind, biomass, solar thermal, and if you're really scraping, maybe a little bit of geothermal and hydro. That's it. That's your bank of things you look at. They all work. We can get some Danes over here for $2 million to install all the wind turbines you need. There's no research
He's been
needed.
told by his doctor that he needs more fiber in his diet, and he's like, I'm looking into over 100 different vegetables to see which ones provide fiber. We know what you should eat!
So all of those different options, but also some clean coal. I think is a good transition into the other things we want to sort of talk about today.
Well, I mean, there's not even really that much to talk about. It's not clean.
Clean coal.
Hang on a minute.
When you hear someone using the term clean coal, that's when you know they're lying, basically.
Well, this is just to contextualize it a bit more. I think a good reason to bring up clean coal as a concept that we want to talk about now. We're dealing with adaptation and mitigation, and one thing I think we're definitely going to hear is the idea that we've got clean coal to rely on. So we're going to be smashing our Paris Agreement numbers because of carryover credits, and we're also going to be smashing our commitment to adapt to the effects of climate change because we're going to start using more clean coal.
And also, that's the reason we need to keep exporting coal because our coal is clean.
Oh, that's the argument that I've seen of like, oh, well, if we stop mining our coal, then all the bloody coal burners in the rest of the world, they're going to start burning that dirty coal and emissions are going to go up.
It's insane.
It is a confusing bit of language because, and I hear it a lot, and a lot of people don't know what it means, and that's fair enough because it's essentially meaningless. But there's two things people mean when they talk about clean coal. Now, one of them is burning coal and then capturing and storing the carbon, what they call CCS, or carbon capture and sequestration. That's one thing they mean when they talk about clean coal. The other thing is they mean that some coal is maybe cleaner than other coal.
Yeah, it's like a washing process at the mine or something.
Maybe, not even. Okay, here's the thing. So the second one, that some coal is cleaner than other coal, is almost meaningless. It is so meaningless. It's like saying some beef is beefier than other beef. Like, it's all beef. If you're trying to be vegetarian, you're not going to go for the low beef, okay? Just don't eat the beef.
Is that the thing, though, when they talk about some coal is cleaner than other coal? The idea that you are essentially putting less carbon emissions into the atmosphere by burning it.
Not really.
Or you're getting the same amount of energy for less emissions.
With CCS, yes.
Hang on.
No,
Let's do one thing at a time. So, different kinds of coal. There are different kinds of coal. You've got brown coal, which is what we have in Victoria, which is very low density. You've got to burn a lot of it to make a bunch of power. By ton, it's very cheap. By ton, you don't get a lot of power out of it, which means it's great to use on site for cheapness, but it's not worth exporting. You can't export it. It's not worth loading it onto a ship. You got to mine more of it. It's generally wetter. You got to heat it up more. It's a little bit more inefficient to burn.
What does wetter mean?
It means there's more water content. It's like wet wood versus dry wood.
Like there's literally just water in the coal and it's got to be taken care of.
It's slightly soggier coal.
Right.
Whereas the stuff you get in Queensland is what you call higher quality coal. It's black. It's very, very dense. And when you burn it per ton, you get more energy. But per bit of energy in your coal, you have the same amount of carbon dioxide. Because that's how coal works. It's like, I don't care if you squish your bread into a tiny, tiny ball or a big fluffy loaf, there's the same amount of bread there. If you eat it, you're getting the same energy. It's just taking up less space.
This is like those arguments that you see for like veganism, saying that there is actually more protein like per 100 kilojoules in broccoli than there are in beef. Which is not talking about the fact that, but you have to eat 3 buckets of broccoli to get the same amount of protein and 200 grams of steak.
So it is technically more efficient to burn your black coal because you can ship it cheaper, you can burn it with less stuffing about. But it's still coal. It's still coal. You're still getting every bit of energy comes with that bit of carbon dioxide and you can't change that.
I've also got to take issue with the economic argument of that, which is like, oh, if we stop exporting our beautiful, clean burning coal...
Which is no cleaner than any other black coal.
People will start buying up the dirty coal and burning that.
Yeah.
The idea that the people who are mining the sort of cheaper, dirtier coal, even to give them that argument, if they're like, oh, but Australia is selling their coal, so we're just going to hold on to ours and not sell it and not burn it. Yeah. Like, what? No. That's a ridiculous argument.
It's classic supply and demand. If we cut off our coal supply, which we should, coal becomes more expensive worldwide. Therefore, people are disincentivized to burn it. If they want to burn it, they still will, but they'll burn less of it. It'll cost them more, and so they will be incentivized to move away. So that's another good argument. Also, people aren't buying coal based on cleanness. They're buying it based on density and price. We're not saying, buy our clean coal. We're just saying our coal's fucking cheap. And you should buy it, and we want you to buy it, and we'll subsidize the hell out of you to buy it.
We will pay you to buy our coal.
Yeah, not
and
that.
We do.
Dirty Indonesian coal. That's the same coal.
Yeah,
you're gonna buy whatever's cheapest.
Yeah, it's just it is like the economic arguments of it never seem to be spelled out in that way. Of like, well, we're gonna pay our coal industry a whole lot of money to get a whole bunch of coal out there because if we don't, they'll use cheaper stuff. No, they won't.
Nah, if we don't,
They'll use
then
more
the
expensive
Murdoch
stuff.
press will say that we're a bad government, and then we will get voted out, and then we won't be able to stop the coal industry. How are we supposed to be able to stop the coal industry
also,
if we get voted out? We've
more-
got to keep the coal industry going.
More of that. We will be voted out eventually because it's a revolving door, and ALP and Liberal Party are no different. But if we do that against the mining council, we're not going to get jobs afterwards.
that's true.
I can't live off $350,000 a year by doing nothing.
The other thing, and this is probably what we're going to have to close on, is that the idea that voting a government out is going to do anything or save us. Because one, we'd be voting in the Labor Party, who is just as bad on coal. And the other part is the next Australian election is 3 years away. So the amount of wrecking that the Liberal Party has available to them over the next 3 years, when they already know that they can run roughshod over literally anything. We have multiple active, very high profile, very provable corruption cases in the live right now.
Electoral corruption as well.
Yeah, and they're not facing any consequences. No pressure is being put internally for any of these ministers to resign, because why would they? They can just get away with it. So, the idea that democracy will save us, I think, is bonkers. And really, it's just going to come down to podcasts.
Yep. Now, hang on. I do just quickly want to finish this clean coal.
right.
All right. So, different kinds of coal. No, there's no coal that's much cleaner than the other that you need to worry about. Carbon capture and storage is also bullshit. Okay, yes, technically it's a technology that you can do. It's still very much in its infancy. No one is doing it around the world, because what it basically means is you get your coal power plant, you attach some machinery to it, or you retrofit it so that all the carbon that would be going to the atmosphere gets captured and turned into, pressurized liquid carbon or solid blocks of carbon or something. Now that...
Sorry, when you say it gets captured, you literally mean that the stuff that comes out of the smokestacks is instead put into barrels or whatever.
Yeah, effectively.
Yeah.
You get the carbon out of the air and burning coal.
However you do it, you essentially don't have that just going into the air.
It may as well be a big vacuum cleaner. Yeah, so theoretically you stop it going into the air.
Yeah.
Then you squeeze it into pressurized tanks or turn it into blocks through some kind of chemical thing. But that whole thing takes a lot of energy. Like tons of energy. Carbon does not like to be in little pressurized blocks or tanks. It's why it likes floating around in the air. It's why you can burn pressurized blocks of carbon, which, by the way, are called coal. It's why you burn them to get energy, because putting it into the blocks takes a lot of energy. And then what you've got is friggin' all this carbon that you can't touch. You can't let it out. You can't burn it. You've got to bury it underground like nuclear waste. But unlike nuclear waste, you make about 4 million times as much for your energy. Now, people don't like nuclear waste dumps, but if you fuck up a nuclear waste dump, you might poison a water source. If you fuck up a carbon waste dump, you poison the whole planet.
That's not a silly exaggerated number either. Is it really about 4 million times as much waste?
I'd have to do a back of the numbers thing, but yeah, each ton of coal you burn lets out 2 or 3 tons of carbon dioxide. We burn about 60 million tons of coal a year in Victoria, so that's a few 100 million tons of carbon dioxide. To compare for that, a coal power plant every year, a nuclear power plant every year uses a couple of tons of nuclear waste.
Right.
Not a couple million. So
it is on the order of millions more.
It's millions of times more waste that you then have to safely store forever. It doesn't even go away after a few thousand years. Now,
cool.
That's not even counting. That's not even counting the cost. It takes about 300 Australian dollars a ton right now to sequester carbon, because it's a newish technology. Coal costs about $70 a ton. So we are effectively tripling the cost of coal power, plus you're losing a bunch of that power because it's a powered process. So you've taken the one maybe defensible thing about coal plants, which is that they're cheap and easy, and you've ruined both of those.
Is that a good argument, though, for an acceleration into the Green New Deal type of change, to just put those things on coal plants, so everyone looking at their electricity bills my coal-fired power plant costs heaps?
I mean, yeah.
I want solar panels.
It's insane, and it economically would never, ever work, but there's already a cheaper way to prevent carbon going into the air, and it's every other kind of renewable. They're already cheaper than coal. You don't make the carbon and then laboriously lock it up. You just don't make the carbon, and you keep it locked up in the ground where it already is.
So
that was a long rant.
Thank you so much, though. That's good stuff.
To sum up, carbon capture and storage is stupid, expensive, and mostly science fiction, and is never going to be an effective solution to anything.
Yep.
Clean coal,
bogus.
is a lie.
So if there's, I think a good rule of thumb then would be that if you ever hear like X coal or something coal, just get rid of whatever that is at the head of it. It's just coal.
Just coal.
Carbon capture coal fire station. It's coal fired station. Clean coal. No, it's just coal. It's dirty coal.
Turning
No,
coal
just
into
coal.
hydrogen, you're still burning the coal. There's
exactly.
nothing good you can do with coal. Leave it in the ground.
Yep. So to end then for this week, we've got a bit of feedback saying that people want more actionable things to do because we're a no doomerism podcast at all. We don't accept that, but we can't also just lay out these issues that are here and then sort of go shit's fucked. So what are some things related to I suppose what we were talking about would be good, but even just in general. I think, like, for me, not to go so far as branch stacking, wink, wink, but if you're not part of a union, join a union. If you are part of a union, they are 9 times out of 10 very open to listening to you and hearing your stance on certain things. And just whenever there's a protest that's happening that you know about, or whenever there is some sort of initiative coming through, get in touch with your union and just see what their stance on it is. And if they have enough people doing that every time, it doesn't matter if you're in a construction union, service union, technology union, anything like that, talk to them about what their position is on this, on whatever issue you're talking about. Because I reckon in like a year or so, we're going to see a lot more union activity around these sectors, especially as coal starts to cost more, jobs start to get lost, and we need to transition into
People
cleaner
start
technology.
dying.
Exactly. Yeah. So and that's the thing as well. So any transport union, workers union are currently in the process now of renegotiating the contracts for their workers to make sure that the employers have masks for the outdoor workers to breathe, because at the moment it's killing workers, long and short term.
Pretty sure if you work at a lot of places, you're already meant to have masks. If you're like Woolies or Coles, working on a loading dock or something.
So I think something to do at the moment would be not just, always call up your local member, write them letters, emails, do the rest of it, agitate that way. Talk to your union about being constructive in the future.
Oh, and move your super out of a thing that invests in coal if you're in a super fund that invests in coal. You've got to divest from that. And if they say, we don't invest in coal, just clean coal, doesn't count. Doesn't count.
Just coal.
That's the other actionable thing. Just know and carry that in your heart with you always. Clean coal, it's just coal.
Go to the Market Forces website. They have all of the details, I think.
We should do a primer on that, but essentially like the idea that your purchases can make a difference is bullshit. No. Your money working for other industries can make a difference. Move out of superannuations and change banks if you haven't already.
The main thing I would say is talk to your friends, talk to the people around you, build your communities, and fight the power, because that is something that we need for mitigation and adaptation, is big communities of people working together and being on the same page.
And if you're nervous about talking to people, just keep in mind this amazing point. More people in Australia support
radical action on climate.
Radical action. Radical is the word. Yeah. They're not even pretty sure that they want something. More people in this country than not support radical action on climate change. So start having discussions with people. Bring it up.
Yeah. It's just, chances are the people that you're hanging around with all the time do support it.
Yeah. So just they're probably scared too.
We got to do something about climate change. We got to do something big.
Yep. And as always, start a podcast.
Yeah.
See you next time. As always, we are at notgoodpod.com. We're on Twitter at notgoodpod, and get in touch with us any way you can. We really want to know what you think.